So yeah, it's wonderful to be back with you today. I thank Pavan for giving really a personal vision of his journey through Postgres. When I didn't even realize that it had been 18 years. It's just, I guess, it's kind of crazy, right? How long we've been at this. It seems like all our lives. In fact, I remember 2006, I don't know if you were there, but in Toronto was our first time kind of bringing everyone together. I guess you were just getting started at that point. And this is the first time I had met most of the Postgres community I had been with for 10 years. Because we didn't have any money to really fly anybody anywhere or rent a hotel, or it was in a university, but still, it took 10 years for us to get to the point where we could bring everyone together. And I really just looked around the group and I said, Postgres has really changed our lives, and everyone just kind of looked at the ceiling and they're like, yeah, I guess it has, even in that first 10 years. And obviously from the 20 years, 18 years since then, it has continued to impact our lives in ways that we can never predict. You said it was one of the best decisions you ever made, and I'm like, wow, and I feel the same way. When you get married or you graduate from college, you're like, okay, this is a big day, this is a big decision I made. But Postgres doesn't come with a diploma or a big suit, a big wedding. It's kind of this thing you just kind of get into, but it ends up impacting you in ways that you never would imagine. As you said, it's one family. Which is also incredibly hard to explain. But if you look at the organizers here who are working as volunteers to make this whole thing happen, I can't imagine how much work. I was here early because I had to do a tutorial, and Tuesday night at midnight, they're all lining the badges up for the next day. So when everyone came, I said, guys, go to sleep. And like, oh yeah, we'll make it. We'll get enough sleep before the tutorial starts at 9 a.m. And I'm thinking, I don't know. But I think the personal side of what we do is often overlooked. I know I talked last year about the future challenges of Postgres, and that was a kind of a big, overarching, organizational level. But the work that we do as individuals is actually a lot sometimes more important, and probably is more relevant, I think, to the group. One of the foundational things is that none of the people who are working on Postgres today created the software. Everyone I know who has been involved has started post 1996 when I started, and we have 10 years of development at the University of California, Berkeley, going back to 1986. The software is 38 years old. Kind of a shocking statement, but it's true. So in a way, we're all building on other people. So it's not like people come now are somehow coming late and the original people are not willing to let them in. It just doesn't feel that way. Because we're all building on engineering that came before us, we're kind of all on an equal footing. And as Pavan said, one of the real attractions for me was getting involved with incredibly smart people. When I was originally started with Postgres in '96, I had been an application developer. I mentioned this in the tutorial yesterday, but I was an application developer, and I've been doing it for 7 years, writing financial reports. And by the time you write 7 years of financial reports, you kind of had it, right? You're not really mentally growing anymore. You put the numbers in the columns and you make sure it lines up right. That's about it. So when Postgres came around and I started getting involved, it was an opportunity for me to grow intellectually, as you said, Pavan, and as a individual to basically get to learn from people who are incredibly smart, much smarter than I was, and that enticed me because I felt that I like to learn, I like to become a better person, and that wasn't happening in my day job. So this was sort of a way that I could get involved and learn things from other people. And as you said, we're looking to bring in more people in that same way. And the growth of Postgres now is really hard to track. We have so many people coming in, and it's just such an exciting place to be. But again, as you said, it was just a happen chance call from Ashish, right? You're like, I don't know what. I guess it looks interesting, but then trajectory it changes your life. I'm going to give an example of another person who had a similar trajectory, which I think will be illustrative. This is about 14 years ago. We had a gentleman called Alexander Korotkov who worked at the Russian Nuclear Research University in Moscow. And I didn't know him at the time, but he wrote a doctoral paper about Postgres, and I believe it was the rewrite system and how we could improve it. And I guess he spent however many years or whatever writing this thing. And I guess at the end of his doctoral process, he emailed us a copy of his doctoral paper. And this actually gets into what Pavan said, you send something and you're like what's going to happen, right? So he sends this document to the community. It's a big PDF. And I don't think anyone said anything originally, because it's like an overwhelming, it's overwhelming, right? This guy spent a year on this. And I remember replying, and I'm like, this is really kind of interesting the way you've taken the code and manipulated it in a way that was really powerful. So it helps when somebody at least gives them a feedback, right? Something. So I guess because I did that, some other people started to look at it, and there kind of got to be a momentum, and we started to say, Alexander, what you've done here is really interesting. Would you be willing to spend some time? Obviously, it's a research paper, so we can't take it as is, right? But would you be willing to work with us for maybe a month or two and help us get that code that you've worked on as a doctoral research into something that we could commit into Postgres? And he said yes. So we worked with him for a month or 2 months, and of course the standard process is, we don't like this is no good, this is wrong, and you're just beaten up as an engineer because they're just throwing so many negatives at you. But they're spending time with you, and if you're wise, you're realizing that you are learning things as you're going. You are becoming a better engineer because you're getting through this iterative process. And I think within 3 months, 4 months, that code was in Postgres. And he probably thought that was it, right? I got it. I got the thing, I got it. So then around the September, October time frame, the software comes out with his change. And people, it's a release note item, and people are like, okay, this is a new feature, and here's the thing. So as you may know, we have a bunch of conferences, pretty much now every month, but at that time it was a little less. But we had a couple conferences coming up, and people asked him, the organizers asked him if he would come and talk about his feature. And he's probably thinking, okay, what happened? I wrote this doctoral thing, and now I spent a couple months getting into the code, and now they want me to fly to Europe to talk about it, right? And I know that his university professors were very confused because they're like, this doesn't happen. The guy writes a doctoral thing and it's done. You don't spend 2 months playing with it and then fly to a conference that we've never heard of, that has no academics at all, to talk about this thing. But that's exactly what he does, and he actually does it several times. And he realizes, and then people start to talk to him at these conferences, and they realize this guy's really smart. We would like to hire him, right? We want him to be working on Postgres. That wasn't clearly his goal when he started. So he eventually gets a job working on Postgres, and there's a big Russian Postgres community. So he co-founds Postgres Pro, which is a big one out of Russia. And within a year or two, Postgres Pro starts to realize, and this is actually a relevant thing for India, we need to promote Postgres within Russia, okay? So they start to plan out these events, and of course this is early on, they need speakers, right? And specifically, Alexander wants me to go to his university and become a professor so I can talk about Postgres. And I go to my employer and I'm like, they want me to spend like, I guess 2 months in Russia doing this master's course on Postgres, and they're like, well, how do we, like, we're paying you, like, how does that work? And we finally come up with some kind of amount that would take, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. But they said, please at least come to our university and spend 2 days and give all your lectures about Postgres. I'm like, okay. So I at that time I'm flying to Russia pretty regular, so I get used to it, and I go into this nuclear university, and like, oh yeah, the nuclear reactor's over in that building over there, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stay over this side of the building, of the facility, and there's probably maybe 45 people, in this tiered seating, and my son Peter's with me, and I just go through a whole bunch of presentations, and we just do it for a day or 2 days. And I'm walking back to my hotel with Alexander. I said, how'd that go? And he's like, I think it went well. But you're looking at the faces of the people, and you're like, I guess it went well. You don't know. You don't know. Just like when you posted your first patch, you don't know. So I never hear anything more about the university thing. I thought it was kind of cool. About 18 months later, I'm in San Francisco at CitusCon. It was a conference we had years ago. And a woman comes up to me, and a man, both students I could recognize, student age, and they say, we were in your class in Moscow 18 months ago, and now we're here speaking about Postgres at the conference. I was like, wow, I guess it worked. Like something happened, right? So the one person I remember particularly is Anastasia Lubinikova. And she went on to work. She now works for Neon, and she has a Postgres job, again, as part of that university thing. And then about a year, 2 years ago, I had a guy in Russia in Israel, who wanted to do like a seminar, very similar to the seminar that I did in Russia, right? And it's a one-day seminar, and he's bringing in like engineers from around Israel to talk about Postgres. And I said, I said, we really need 2 people to do this. Anastasia Lubakova would be a perfect person to do this because she's already in Cyprus. Cyprus to Israel is really close. And we really would nice to have 2 people. And eventually it turns out that I end up doing it virtually because this is during COVID or whatever. And then she's the one who ends up doing the class for Israel, right? So if you think of that chain of process, you have me going to the university, you have them going to CitusCon and speaking, and then ultimately Anastasia ends up going to Israel and doing a class similar to the one I did in Russia probably 5 years ago. And I think that's a great illustration of that process that Pavan talked about, and that process that continues to occur in Postgres. Now, many of you may be thinking, these people are crazy, right? Like, why? Like, I got enough to do. Why would I get involved in? There's probably no money in it. The organizers here at this conference are running around like crazy. Like, why do I do that, right? Is there something the matter with us that we do this? And I would argue no. It sounds crazy only because we've sort of grown up in a structure where everything is very hierarchical, right? Where there's the guy with the money or the woman with the money, and then they hire some managers, and then they tell the other people what to do, and then that kind of goes down. You know, whether you're Tata or whether you're a small company, there's this hierarchical structure that's really driven by money, right, and power, and everyone sort of gets their marching orders from above, and the people below there until the person actually does the job. And I would argue that open source kind of flips that over a little bit. It prevents a much more flat structure than the hierarchical one that you typically work in a commercial organization. But, you know, as they say in the United States, you know, the proof is that it actually works, right? That obviously we can't dispute that open source is an incredibly powerful force, and in fact, it provides very lucrative and very rewarding jobs for thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. So something must be working in this structure that is really different than the traditional organizational structure. And the four things that really get people into that structure, into that new way of working. The first one, and Pavan actually talked about it, is the concept of professional advancement, concept of learning new skills. Again, as I said, I was bored after 7 years of financial reports, so being able to work with smart people was like super exciting to me, right? The second reason people get involved in Postgres is practical. So they have need for the software. They may want to get a job in Postgres, right? So there's a practical application for that. The third one, and I don't want to minimize this one, is mental stimulation. The idea that you actually are doing something interesting and you're actually using your brain to create. I know that sounds trivial, but you know, if you ever play with a puzzle or wanted to solve a problem, and once you're done, you're like, oh, this is great, I actually achieved something. That's what we do all the time. It's frustrating sometimes, but that, you know, it doesn't make it any less rewarding when you actually achieve it. And finally, the fourth reason that I think people get involved is the belief in open source software, the concept of being able to give software out to a community which is used across the globe by so many people, and that is tremendously rewarding. So if you go to any of the community people who are involved and you say, which one of these four things got you involved, they may pick one or two, but it's kind of all of them together. It's not a case of one of them and the other ones they don't care about. Often it's a mixture of these that really kind of drives people. So again, if you look at you know, there's probably a lot of people here who don't understand what I'm saying. There's a bunch of people here who are confused by what I'm saying. But I would argue that it is a powerful place to be. Again, our conference organizers are in that process. The community people are in that process. And you know, as I said before, we're having conferences, probably a huge conference every month or two now, based on how busy Postgres is. And I would just leave you with the concept that a lot of you may be involved with Postgres because you're just like, I'm here to save money. I'm here because I want to get away from some proprietary software. I don't really care about this community stuff. Just keep producing the software and I'll be good, right? And there's nothing wrong with that concept, but I will say that people don't have conferences to save money. The reason we have so many conferences, the reason I have to go to so many conferences every year, is not to tell people how to save money. And people, once they save money, they just move on. Like, okay, I saved money, I got other things to do, right? The reason these conferences exist is because of the technology. The technology is so exciting, it is so revolutionary, it changes the way engineers can do their work and enables engineers to be so much more powerful than they were without the software. That is why we have these conferences. And the effort that goes into that software every year is what makes that software possible. So I want to thank you for this. I know it's going to be a great conference. It's great to see everybody today. I'm looking forward to talking to you in the hallways before we start our next session. Thank you.